Altos is brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.
Good evening and welcome to Altos, a special 1 hour long edition of our program this week as we take a look back at some of our big interviews from 2024. The year marked many significant milestones for Altos. We sat down for an exclusive interview with Her Excellency Christine Carla Kangaloo on her first anniversary in office as president, and we learned from the Children's Authority just how big of a problem child abuse is in Trinidad and Tobago, and much more. Tonight we highlight just a few of the contributions our guests made to Altos in the year that is about to come to an end. We begin with our exclusive interview with President Christine Carla Kangaloo, who spoke to Altos about what the challenges were and some of her rewarding moments in her first year in office.
March 20th marks the first anniversary of your inauguration as President of the Republic. Describe for us in one word how the journey has been for the last year.
May I use my president's prerogative and give you 2 words?
Of course you can.
Yes. So, challenging, rewarding.
Challenging and rewarding.
Yes, those would be the 2 words that I would use.
What has made it challenging and what has made it rewarding for you so far?
The challenging aspect came from the change in my life, in our lives, my husband's as well. There are things that we had to adjust to. So, for example, the word spontaneous doesn't arise. You know, we can't just decide that we want to go to the mall, or, you know, go to visit friends. Those things have to be planned. So there were adjustments that we had to make. So that's just one example. The other challenging parts of being the president with respect to the work itself. So, for example, trying to find persons to serve. Persons are very reluctant. You're trying to get different persons to come and serve on different boards.
The commissions.
But they are quite afraid of being in public life and what that entails. So that has been a challenging part of it.
But has your experience in public life, I mean, if you share that with them, has that been any kind of comfort at all?
Yes. No, not at all. I have tried that. I've tried to point out that I have been doing this for quite some time. But you find that given the environment, persons are really reluctant to step up to serve in that public way. So that has been a major challenge for the office.
And that reluctance comes with a lot of the declarations that people would have to make.
That's correct.
In other words, putting your business out in the road, as we say.
Yes.
There is that hesitance.
That's correct.
So, Your Excellency, you spoke of the loss of spontaneity. Does that mean that you no longer get to go to the grocery, you no longer get to do those simple pleasures of life that you're accustomed to?
I'm actually able. Remember, I spoke earlier about being very grateful to our detail. So yes, I get to go to the grocery from time to time and do my
your
rounds
own shopping
and that sort of thing. Yes. And very interestingly, when I last went to the grocery, a woman came up to me and she said, "Do you know that you look like the president of Trinidad and Tobago?" I said, "Really?" Yes, and then it dawned on her, but it was very funny. Yes, so yes, I get to do those things as well.
So that's a challenging part. What has been rewarding for you in this?
Rewarding, and I have to say, I said challenging first, because the rewards have been tremendous and outweigh the challenges. It's a privilege to be in this office, to hold this office. My interaction with young people has been tremendously exciting and encouraging, and that aspect of it has really lifted both my husband and me as we go through this stage of our lives.
And would you say this has been the most rewarding part of the job so far?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Being with the children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another highlight for me of the last year was having the national awards return to President's House. That was also a big undertaking to get it to be hosted here again, because in the past, they used to be at President's House. So that was something that I was really pleased with during the first year.
So there are lots of people who believe that the president has a lot more authority than she has. So you couldn't just snap your fingers and let it come back here.
No, the decision to have it here was easy, you know. But of course, you know, you had to make adjustments to the number of persons who could be invited. But ultimately, I think we were all very pleased with the reception that we got from the awardees coming to President's House. I think it made it a lot more significant for them, the entire occasion, and we were happy that we achieved that.
And happy to host the national awards.
Yeah, and that of course was tying in to the fact we wanted the President's House to be accessible.
Right, the accessibility.
So it tied in.
An historic interview for Altos, certainly earlier this year. Well, the issue of child abuse in this country and the issues affecting children seem to dominate the national landscape in 2024. Rhonda Gregoire-Rupchan, General Manager of the Children's Authority, spoke to Altos about the growing scourge of child abuse and children's issues.
Annually, we are up to an average of almost 5,000 cases coming to us. And that means that as a society, we really need to do better. We have a lot of responsibility in caring for children. The types of cases coming to us at the authority right now fall very heavily in the category of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and neglect of our children. And in each month, we can have an average of 400 cases coming to us of children who have been reported to be abused or maltreated. So really it is, from the authorities' point of view, a growing challenge, but it's also one that we take on with our stakeholder partners, because our mantra is we must focus on the best interests of the child, but also that child protection is everybody's business. And so we want to engage the public in this month, Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, to make sure that everyone knows and is aware of how they can do their part to help to reduce the number of abuse cases coming to us.
So you said 5,000. Over what period of time?
That is an annual figure, and the monthly figure is just about 400, between 400 and 500.
So is it that more cases are being reported now because of greater access to technology, you have a hotline, etc., or is it that more abuse is happening?
Yeah, I would want to say that we are now becoming more aware, and more persons are reporting because they have an avenue to do so. We still suspect that in certain areas there is some level of underreporting, but we have known that child abuse and mistreatment of children has been in most of our lives. We've been aware, but now we are speaking out about it and providing an avenue for us to be able to treat with the matter and provide for children. There's also a lot of sensitization and campaigns going on from the authority and even with our partners. For example, in our line ministry, Gender and Child Affairs Office of the Prime Minister, where we are joining together to make sure that members of the public know about child abuse, that children know their rights and their responsibilities, and that persons know how to report child abuse. And so that's my view of an increase in the numbers that we're seeing.
Right, and tell us a little bit about the relationship between the police service and the Children's Authority, because I want to think when there's an issue of possible violence against children, abuse, most people may make a report to the police in their district. Do the police, I know they have a special unit as well that deals with children. What's that relationship like, and does it need to be strengthened between the police and the authority?
Absolutely. The police, particularly the Child Protection Unit, and more so the Special Victims Unit, which now incorporates the Child Protection Unit as well as the Domestic Violence Unit, we are very close partners, very, very close partners. And it was anticipated and continues to grow that we intervene on cases together as far as our resources allow. The police report all cases of abuse into the authorities' hotline and vice versa. The role of the police is criminal investigation. They are the ones that deal with the perpetrator and bringing charges. The role of the authority is psychosocial investigation, focusing on the needs of the child. But you would appreciate that these two go hand in hand to bring true justice and to ensure that prevention of child abuse is a feature of our joint activity. So yes, there's close collaboration with the police, and there's also built out memorandums of understanding, as well as process agreements between us where we can work together as best as possible on all cases of abuse, but also on specific issues affecting both of our entities.
And when we look at Trinidad and Tobago as part of the region, the Caribbean, we have a similar type of cultural and societal background. Do we stand out, or what's the situation when we look at the rest of the Caribbean and child abuse and some of the things that are happening with our children?
The research that we've done so far and looking at the cases that we received is showing that there is quite a number of similarities in the trends that we are seeing across the Caribbean, and some of our international best practice and evidence-based work, which is what we use to guide our own process, tells us that some of the trends we are seeing are quite similar. What is concerning and what is important is that we know how to treat with abuse and how to engage the public to make sure that members of the public know when they see an abuse what to do, who to call, when they call, what is going to happen, and how can they have a role in supporting a child. The authority has recently signed off on the National Protocol for Child Abuse Prevention and Management, and that aims to show both the public and members of our child protection ecosystem, all the people who work in child protection, what do we do, where our part starts, where our part ends, so that a child being reported to us can really have the best experience and the most efficient experience because we are working together. So the trends we are seeing mirror what is happening in Trinidad, and we are addressing it by making sure that collaboration is happening amongst the stakeholders in child protection, including the police.
And June was Men's Mental Health Month, and psychologist Sule Joseph joined us on the Altos set to talk about issues affecting men.
What are some of the most common mental health issues affecting men?
Well, we're making an assumption here already that everybody accepts that men suffer with mental health issues, right? Is that a thing? Do men suffer with mental health issues? I mean, the conceptualization of manhood is somebody who can handle it all. If you can't handle it all and you have a breakdown and you're suffering with mental health issues, are you a man, right? So we jumped the gun into talking about the various issues that men deal with, because essentially a lot of men are stigmatized as perhaps not being men because they have to deal with mental health issues. And it goes against the gender norms and the expectations of a man being expected to handle everything. And incorporated in everything is his own mental health. So if you can't handle that, then are you really a man?
Yeah, because and the socialization that we've been exposed to in a number of cases was if you as a boy, if you're crying, then you're being girly.
Of course.
You know, and you're supposed to suck it up and just continue.
Nobody asked me if I'm afraid of the cockroach or the dead rat. You know what I mean? My job is to go take it out. That's my job. And forget how I feel, stuff my feelings, hide that, and just go do the job. Which is what we train our young men and then big adult men to be persons who stuff their feelings, put aside your mental health, and just do the job.
But the effect of that, as we've seen in so many cases, let's say in domestic violence, for instance, is that the only way I can express my emotions is through violence.
Well, the thing is, we have been socialized to not express emotions or express our inner feelings and so on, except through very specific means that are acceptable to the society. And I call that we are allowed 2.5 emotions. The first emotion is happy. You're allowed to be a happy man. So if you're happy, great. That's excellent. That's allowed as a man. You can be happy. You can be angry. That's acceptable. A man can get angry. And you can be numb. That's the half emotion I call the half emotion, right? You're allowed to be numb or feel nothing. From the time you start talking about a man being sad or a man crying and so on, you're entering into a realm of non-manhood, of what men start, you refer to as a sissy man or a pseudo man or those sorts of things. And so you're right. When we express, and I know we don't have time to get into the differences between emotions and feelings, but essentially when the emotions that men feel, which are natural emotions, that's natural responses to stimuli, external stimuli, right? Oftentimes are not the feelings that we display. So we may have an emotion of sadness, But the feeling we express is anger.
Yeah.
So what we show is that in domestic violence, you might be disappointed with something that your wife did. You may feel hurt, but then you express anger as a feeling because that's what's acceptable. That's an acceptable feeling for a man to display, right? And so yes, you'll see a lot of things like domestic violence. You'll see a lot of men lashing out. You'll see a lot of men shutting down, and you'll see, this person is really cold and they can't. And it might just be not that they're cold, but they have a lot of emotions and they don't know how to express it safely.
But in your practice as a psychologist, and you treat with people right through,
yeah.
What are you seeing? Are more men coming forward for, putting up their hands and saying, I need help?
Actually, I would say within the last 2 to 3 years, I've started seeing a lot more male clients. Previously, it was predominantly women and children. And I'm now seeing a lot more male clients recognizing that they have their own mental health needs to take care of and coming and stepping forward. I'm seeing male clients reaching out for family therapy, for relationship therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So male clients saying, listen, I recognize something is not quite right here, and I need me and mine. I'm the head of my household, and me and mine, we need to come and address the issues that we're having, because I'm having a difficult time doing that.
And when you see that happening, what's the response of the partner? Are they usually willing to come along, or is this, or are we seeing the reverse now, where the partners are saying, no, we can't be bothered with that?
It's a bit of a mix, actually, and you're quite right. It's a bit of a mix where there's a bit of an inverse role, where now you have women saying, listen, I can't be bothered with this nonsense, right? Let's the woman pray about it, right? So we'll pray about it. I can't be bothered with that nonsense and so on. And they just take your money. This is a scam, right? We'll just work through it. I have a lot on my plate and so on as a working woman and so on and all these other things, and so we're seeing a bit of a reversal in that regard. Now, to those persons at home, people watching, what I usually say is, prayer without works is dead. So what you want to do, praying is all well and good, and I encourage it, but you need to put in the work as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to come to these sessions. You need to find out what the issues are. What are you praying about? You need to pray specifically, right? So you need to figure out what are those specific issues that you're having,
mm-hmm.
That you need to work on, and then you can pray about that.
So you can love Jesus and have a therapist as well.
Correct. Correct is right.
Yeah?
Correct is right. Yeah. Jesus doesn't need therapy.
Psychologist Sule Joseph. Well, with crime taking center stage in 2024 and daily reports of murders and an increase in kidnappings throughout the year, Altos sat down with Professor Oluwemi Mashama, a qualified security expert who gave us some valuable tips on personal safety and security.
The biggest thing we have to do is deal with our behavioral patterns, our attitudes towards what is happening in our country. It's happening, it's here, we need to adapt, we need to train, we need to develop. So I always like to say personal safety and self-defense is an art. The A standing for attitude, and what type of attitudes we have and we portray to what is happening to us. Are we going to have attitude of, well, it's not happening to me? Are we going to have the attitude that, hey, let's see what we can come together and do to make it better? Or are we going to have the attitude that it is happening and I don't care? We need to have a positive attitude towards the environment and development. It's happening, how can we fix it? How can we come, and it was said earlier, how can we come together to fix it? Because it's not a one-person thing. It's not a government thing. It's not a police thing. It's a country thing. So our attitude is very important. And one of the things that deals with the attitude also is what we do in the environment. How do we now change the attitude of the perpetrators to not want to have to come at us in that way? Then we go to the R, the responsibility. The responsibility falls on all of us. All of us as citizens, we are responsible for our safety, our security in different areas. And then we come down to keeping and making the criminals responsible for their actions on the different levels. So again, whatever our response must be, must give an idea to the criminals that, hey, every action, there's a reaction, everything you do, there's a consequence. And then we deal with trust. And trust deals with trusting in ourselves, trusting in a greater power, trusting in God, trusting in the environment, trusting in the powers that be, and trusting in our fellow man in the environment. And how can we now change our behaviors and our attitudes to develop and to work alongside each of the areas that I just spoke about?
So let's just say I'm going home, for instance. I suspect that I'm being followed. What is my attitude? What is my responsibility? And what do I trust?
So your attitude is that as you're always being followed in the first place, whether you're thinking it's not about being paranoid. There's a difference between paranoid and being aware. Mm-hmm. So I must have the attitude that, hey, I am being followed any which way. What can I do? So I must be, some people, I remember following a neighbor from Port of Spain straight to home. And they did not even recognize that my vehicle was behind them. And this is from Port of Spain to central area. They didn't even realize. Because again, most of the times what the criminals work on is the fact that they know that we are tired. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's after work, sometimes you're just stressed out with something. So your whole situational awareness is off from that point of view. So you must have the attitude that, hey, I am possibly being followed, be aware of my surrounding. It's my responsibility to, one, reach home safely, or to reach wherever I'm going safely, to reach back to my family. You know, normally when we leave home, we say to our families, we'll see you later. We have a responsibility from that point of view, but we also have a responsibility to the country. Because it's our responsibility to do what is necessary to make sure that the crime rate don't go up anymore by doing the right things. It might be making sure that we have money on the phone to make a call if something happens, making sure that we have a proper tire in the car, making sure that our windows are up in certain areas, our doors are locked, making sure that we keep the distance between us and the car in front, because sometimes when we go close to a vehicle in the front of us, we have that closeness to the front, closeness to the back. If something happens, we may need to maneuver out. All these are things that sometimes we take for granted. So it's our responsibility to also get the proper training to be able to deal with these specific scenarios. Because we train for anything else we have to do. If we have to get our driver's permit, we have to go for a job, we do these things. But what do we do to train ourselves to be safe?
So is this defensive driving training or another kind of training that you're at?
I like to say personal safety, because personal safety training involves everything that could keep us safe. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about the defensive driving alone. It's about self-defense. It's about situational awareness. It's about maybe understanding basic things about your car to know when, hey, maybe I start my car and something's off, because you don't want to shut down in the wrong area. You don't want to be in a space where I'm not supposed to be here. But if I'm here, what do I do? Who do I call? Who do I have that I'm sure I could get onto? Because sometimes we say, we call the police station and we didn't get through. So sometimes I advise persons, have somebody on speed dial who will answer for sure, mm-hmm. that you could tell them, hey, this is what is happening now. You call the police. Have a person where we could send our location. Most times when I'm leaving from one spot to the next, I'll put on my live location and have somebody monitor it just in case. So they could know, okay, I'm on my way home. I'm supposed to reach at this time. So this is supposed to happen. These simple things that we do, even with our children, put on the live locations on the phone. Let them at that point, okay, I'm coming home now. I'm leaving school. So these are things that give added support as it relates to safety. Be aware of your surrounding. And one of the things that I like, the tools that I like to give to use for that is something called the color codes. It was developed by a guy by the name of Jeff Copper. He died. He was an old Navy colonel, and he died a while back. But he developed some color codes that help us react or to deal with our environment as it relates to safety and security. We had white. White is when we're totally unaware, which unfortunately is where most people live. You don't want to be there. That is having a victim mentality. Then we have yellow. Yellow is where you are aware of your surroundings, but not paranoid. So you are aware of possible dangers. You are aware of things that could happen. You know that we live in a world where these things could exist. Then we have orange. Orange could only function properly when you're in yellow, because now you are able to identify a possible threat and either move away or deal with it based on what you may be trained to do or what you may not be trained to do. So you could react to it. We have red. Red is where you may have identified it. You was in yellow, you identified it in orange, but it happened so suddenly they didn't give you any time to maneuver. So now you have to respond because the action is happening now. I have to respond. whatever it may be. And then we have black. Black is where you wasn't white, totally unaware, and something happens, you don't want to be there either. So it's ideally you want to be in yellow, you want to be aware, not paranoid, not studying fear to the extent, because again, that will create mental issues for you. You want to create that environment and still. Yeah.
Well, my producer is telling me that we are red now and I have to stop.
Yeah.
Well, this country marked our 67th anniversary of independence, and on August 30th, the day before Independence Day, the Altos set was blessed with the presence of retired priest Monsignor Christian Pereira. Monsignor Pereira was ordained in 1976 and was among those who witnessed the 1990 insurrection. Here's some of what he had to share.
In 1990, I was actually the priest in cathedral.
Yes.
When just after saying Mass, I saw people moving in a helter-skelter way. And smoke from a distance, I didn't recognize the building. And when I turned on the TV, I thought there was some play going on.
Like so many of Trinidad and Tobago. But how have we changed? Have we learned anything as a country? Have we learned anything from 1970, 1990, given where we are now?
Things have changed because of these events. But the lessons that we have to learn are still to be sorted out and unearthed among ourselves. So we're still trying to find that way in which these lessons can become real for us.
What are some of those lessons, you think?
The sense that all of us have a place here. We knew it in the words of our anthem, we knew it in the speeches of people, but we still have to find that inward connectivity that really and truly must be a real part of all that we say and do.
We had a situation where at a consultation very recently, one person saying to another, a lady of African descent, go back to Africa. Do you think that is still something that is pervasive in our country today, that attitude, that sentiment? In
a very, very diminished way. Dr. Eric Williams started the dissociation when he said there's no more Mother Africa, Mother Syria, Mother China, Mother India. And again, his words of 62 years ago are still trying to find roots in our psyche, so that while people have some sense of an African background or an Indian background, more and more people are realizing that we are Trinbagonians. We belong to a culture, a society that is evolving, much younger than the African society in one way, much younger than the Indian society. But our society didn't begin with the Indians and the Africans, so that we have to really adjust ourselves to understanding what happened to the peoples who belong here, who had a civilization here, that were disrupted primarily by the colonial people who came, the European masters, and that put us back a bit. Then we started to build a new society, and the foundation for that new society was very shaky with the disruption and the destruction of the real foundation, which is the first peoples. And now that we are trying to find that connectivity, that connection with our original peoples, and how we came and how we integrated the bounces and bruises, the difficulties, the hiccups in finding a way to live in a manner that would integrate all of us.
Only last Sunday, Archbishop Gordon, and we had it in one of the earlier stories, yes. Archbishop Gordon tendered an apology on behalf of the church to the First Peoples. Do you think that's part of the reconciliation that is needed in our country today?
Part of it, and probably not the only part. It was very important for him to do what he did. And an apology is one thing, but an embrace is slightly different. I could apologize to you, but I still have to embrace you. And I still have to understand that the people I'm apologizing to had something. And how do we value what is part of our deepest culture? The Africans, the Hindus, the Indians, the Chinese and others have learned some of that, very subterraneanly, but not overtly enough.
Okay. In 2014, at a Good Friday Mass in San Fernando, you used an acronym, PALE gas, basically pointing out what we call the 7 deadly sins. But you said there were you call them capital sins, which have been crippling the nation. Those ills, you said then, form the base of the spiritual corruption in the country. Since then, 2014 to now, 10 years later, do you still believe that? Do you still think we still have that?
Well, the acronym Pale Gas was, very, a gift given to me as I was preparing that sermon based on the 7 capital or 7 deadly sins. And I use that acronym because I realized that gas in itself and the whole gas industry had caused a lot of problems in the society. Right. And it is symbolic of the deeper problems which are rooted in the 7 deadly sins, the 7 capital sins, however you want to call it. And trying to reflect on these 7 deadly sins, which with the acronym Pale Gas, I try to link the societal decay with the inner human decay, and to try to see that in fact what was going on in our abandoning of the virtues, because maybe I should have preached again about the 7 capital virtues, the main virtues, that would allow ourselves to rise out of that pale gas, out of those 7 deadly sins.
Monsignor Christian Pereira. Well, we'll take a break, and when we return, the Archbishop has some advice for us as we enter the Jubilee year, and we take a look back at our interview with the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell, after the passage of Hurricane Beryl. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon spent a month in Rome earlier this year as Pope Francis met with Roman Catholic bishops to discuss the whole issue of synod and synodality. The final document was accepted by the Holy Father without any changes. As we get set to go into Jubilee year 2025, His Grace sat down with Altos to speak about what we as Catholics and citizens of this country need to do to make 2025 a better year for all of us.
The Gospel tells us that we ought not to cover the light with a bushel. How do we speak that kind of transformation and that kind of conversion to a society now where we see, in terms and the darkness of everything that is around us, the forex challenge, the crime and criminality,
everything,
bullying in our schools,
the suicide of our children.
How do we as church speak to that?
The despair of the youth. Well, it starts by everyone recognizing that this is a new kind of year. And we have to have a new mindset in this year. And I'm praying and I'm asking each of our viewers to start praying from now that we would really put on the mind of Christ as we enter into this Jubilee year. I think if we change mindset as a start, if we start treating people like people, if we start listening with a deeper heart, if we become more discerning and asking God, what do you want out of this situation? And if we are willing to do a little self-emptying and put ego aside for a little while. Imagine if we could put ego aside for 1 year and then it becomes a habit and we could take it into 5 years. I think the country would breathe and exhale a bit. And I think we as Catholics would find a new joy from a much deeper place to bring that into our national space.
It's interesting that we see that in light of the Jubilee. One of the activities of the Jubilee is the opening of the 7 doors, and I know you're going to start at the cathedral.
Yes.
There is the imminent threat of one of those doors in Tortuga. We've seen where there's an arsonist, a suspected arsonist, and one of those, the church in Tortuga, is in fact under threat. How would you as Archbishop speak to that? And to the national community with respect to that threat to one of the doors and to the church in particular?
I think you can't isolate it to one church. The Hindus have had a similar experience with a threat in one of their temples. I think, when a country loses the sense of the sacred, the country is in deep peril. And whichever sacred site, whether it is a mandir, a temple, a church, a house church, whatever it is, when people are willing to do violence to a sacred site, we have crossed some lines that we have to come back from. And I would make a national appeal, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of your persuasion, even if you think you're an atheist, let's at least respect the beliefs of other people. And let's at least see the sacred spaces that we have as important for other people. And let's create that sense of sacredness around all of our sacred sites.
And it was, I think, St. John Paul II who spoke about the loss of the sense of sin as the biggest sin, really.
Yeah.
And that is what you're alluding to now, that loss of the sense of the sacred.
Correct. And when you lose the sense of the sacred, the next thing that goes is the most vulnerable in the society.
It is. So we talk euthanasia and all that goes with it.
But also you talk about oppression of the poor. And the real hopelessness we are facing right now is a whole group of people who are underemployed or unemployed and can't find a way to see a hope for today and for tomorrow.
How does the opening of the doors, we speak of 7 doors, can you identify the 7 doors for us?
Oh gosh. But I know we have Tortuga,
we have the cathedral.
We have the cathedral, Superior San Fernando, Curap, Sandy Grande, and Assumption.
You see, you did well. But how does
he's testing me, okay? He's testing me.
How does the opening of the doors and that imagery of the opening of the doors of the church, how does that speak to us as a country in terms of what we need in the country at this point?
So these doors are doors of grace. These are doors of love. These are doors of mercy. And the opening of the door is really symbolic of grace, love, and mercy that is flowing from the heart of God out through all the parts of our society. And no, you let me off the hook, you know. Scarborough, Tobago, St. Joseph, he's not counted. He's failed maths. He took a 6 for 7. He failed maths. All parts of the country, and this was very deliberate, grace will be flowing out from God to the different parts of our nation.
Apart from the opening of the doors, what else can we expect as part of the Jubilee year?
We'll have a lot of activities in the Vicariate. In May, we're going to have a major event, a Eucharistic Congress, where we're bringing in some people. Cardinal Tegeli, who is the head of the dicastery for evangelization of people. He's coming in.
Confirmed as coming?
He's coming in. He was sitting on a minor table with me. Over 2 different weeks. Okay, let's just leave it that he's agreed that he's coming.
Excellent.
And we're looking at a few other people to come in for that event. Some of the bishops of our region will come in for that event also. So we'll have that as a major event, and down at the end of the year, we'll have a second major event. And in between, people will have a little passport.
Okay.
And your passport, when you go to a sacred site, you make sure and get your passport stamped. And at the end of the year, when you have your passport all stamped with all the things that you could have done for the Jubilee, then you have something that takes you into the next year, that says to you that, grace from these doors, from the heart of God, has flowed. And now I have to become the door opening for mercy to flow into the land.
On Labor Day this year, the Roman Catholic Church held a conference to discuss the issue of leadership in our church. Father Peter McIsaac, Director of Synodal Transformation in the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, joined us on the Altos set to talk about the important issue facing the church.
What is the model of leadership that we're looking for?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I would like to preface it by saying that I think that what Pope Francis is doing is in great continuity with all of his predecessors. From the moment of Vatican Council II, the emphasis was on the full and active participation of all of the baptized. That means that over the years, we have been trying to find ways to get people more involved in liturgy, get them involved in ministries, get them involved in community. And now we're looking at the structures of decision-making. How is it that we make decisions in the church? It's not really a dislocation, if you like, of the institutional structure. It's more an invitation for our leadership to be much more discerning. Where do we find the Spirit in the community? And how does the leader of the community, whether it's a priest or deacon or lay leader, how do they respond to the pastoral need? In that regard, I think that Pope Francis is a wonderful model. He's somebody who listens very carefully. He's somebody who listens to all voices and tries to discern what it is that the Spirit is leading us to. He does have a very rootsy sort of way about him. He's very gentle. He's very compassionate. He's very pastoral. And I think that this is a helpful model for us. We have been discussing servant leadership for a long time, missionary discipleship. All of these elements are part of this move, if you like, towards a much greater discerning community.
Discerning. And that's important. I think in terms of and we speak of formation. In the formation of our seminarians, are we forming future priests, pastors, or leaders, or a combination of all three?
I think that the formation program at the seminary is very good. It's balanced. It has a number of different elements which are important. I think that they get very good spiritual formation. That opens them to an intimate relationship with God, which then kind of leads them to understand who they are in relationship both to God as well as to the people of God. I think in some ways the focus is on teaching them and giving them the skills that they need in order to be good pastoral leaders, those who listen, who help to discern, who are engaged in their ministries in a very compassionate way. So I'm living at the seminary at the moment. I am most impressed by the guys that are coming through, and by the leadership, both of the Archbishop, but also the Rector and Monsignor Cuthbert.
Excellent. Yeah. How do we transfer the synodal experience that we've just gone through, that entire exercise, to the leadership at the level of the parish? And let me put you on the spot. The leadership of the level of the
and get people to participate in the processes of decision making.
You mentioned servant leadership earlier, and that's one of the, if we look at the model of Christ,
yeah,
a model of servant leadership. And in any kind of organization, you will have multiple, as you indicated, multiple styles of leadership. How do we get our not just the Catholic Church, what do we as church say to the wider community, the wider national community, about that need for us to push for a greater sense of servant leadership?
Yeah, it's crucial, and I think that this is the way in which we are prophetic as a church. If we adopt the norms of society and its models of leadership, the church will find itself in a very difficult place. If, however, we can be a leaven in society and provide examples and models of leadership which are more humane, more respectful of the dignity of every person. If we can manage to be that model for society, I think it's important. I think Jesus understood that. He wanted to warn his disciples against a style of leadership that was destructive, but he also wanted them to be leaven in the wider society.
Father Peter MacIsaac. Well, in July this year, Hurricane Beryl devastated the Grenadian dependencies of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell, admitted to Altos it was hard not to cry having witnessed the devastation and the trauma of those affected.
Looking at it on television is one thing. Seeing it in reality is a whole different ball game. And we therefore want to take the opportunity to bring attention, the world's attention, our partners' attention, to climate change. We've been doing so consistently, but I think we now have a renewed opportunity to do that. So yes, we're going to host the CARICOM heads meeting. I again want to show my gratitude and appreciation to the CARICOM Secretariat and to my colleagues in CARICOM for all of the help, the assistance and the solidarity that they've shown with Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Jamaica, which have been impacted by this.
Prime Minister, in terms of the people and rebuilding your house is one thing. You spoke about the psyche of the people. What is the mood in Carriacou, in Petit Martinique? How are people dealing with this? Not just in terms of rebuilding a house, but rebuilding their psyche, the psychological part of it. What are people feeling and what are they saying about that?
Well, I think there's no question that in the immediate aftermath, and I will still consider this period as the immediate aftermath, people have been traumatized, deeply so. That people would have been in disbelief and shock and horror. And we recognize that. And so having psychosocial support for the entire population is something that we've started doing, and it's something that we are going to have to continue doing. And some of our regional partners have offered assistance in that regard. So a lot of that is going to have to continue. I was in Petit Martinique on Sunday and just walking the streets, we met people who just broke down and started crying. It's hard not to cry, to be honest with you. It is very difficult not to cry, not to despair when you see the level of damage and destruction, and you think about what you will have to do. For many of the persons in their 50s, in their 60s, who worked hard all their lives to build their homes and so on, it's difficult to have to start all over at this stage. So psychosocial, post-traumatic stress support is going to have to be done. I think that's part of the reason why we have a lot of volunteers from Grenada going up, because we recognize we have to provide that comfort, provide that support, help with the cleaning up efforts. We think that that's crucial, because if you drive around and you keep seeing this level of destruction and it doesn't appear as if it's changing, it's easier to fall into a depressed state. So we want to make sure that we are aggressive with the cleanup, because we think that sends the right signal. It starts sending the message of hope. And we want to obviously give the economy in Carriacou and Petit Martinique an opportunity to start kicking again. So even if it's just cleanup work, we certainly will be looking to pay people and to pay contractors and give people in Carriacou the first priority to help with that process. But we recognize this is going to require a lot of psychosocial support for a considerable period of time. But we are confident that the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, the people of St. Patrick, St. Mark, St. Andrew are very resilient, will rise again. Many of the communities have started cleaning up. I was in Dover yesterday, and it's a coastal village that has been battered. Boats and so on have literally been pushed into the road, and people were there seeking to take the boats out, to move them back, cleaning up the drains so that water could flow and you don't have mosquitoes and flooding. And the residents have said, just bring me some more chainsaws, Prime Minister, we will start doing our own thing. So it's a clear sense of the resilience, and that people are going to get up and rise again.
Prime Minister, the Catholic Church in Trinidad certainly extends, our condolences for those who have died, and we have started our own drive here in Trinidad and Tobago to be able to assist. What can you say to the population of Trinidad and Tobago, not just the Catholic population, because there are others who watch this program? What can you say to us about what you experience and about what you would like us to do?
Right. Well, I think, as I said, what we've experienced is a very, very, very traumatic event. And to quote my son, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And so I think it's a message, it's a lesson for all of us in the Caribbean, and for all islands, in the Atlantic, in the Pacific, that the climatic events are deadly, they're serious, and we need to prepare for them. We need to take it seriously, both the preparation and making sure we have plans to deal with it in the immediate aftermath of that. And so the solidarity amongst nations, the solidarity amongst people, that unity needs to be there to make sure we can help each other and support each other in times like these. I want to thank the government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago for their tremendous outpourings of support, encouragement, solidarity, material assistance, in this time, and their continued support. We really do appreciate it. It reminds us of Black Stalin, the Caribbean man, and that we all, one people. And so, again, thank you to the people of Trinidad and Tobago for the continued support in our relief and restoration efforts.
And following the passage of Hurricane Beryl and with the forecast of an active hurricane season, Altos spoke to meteorologist Gary Benjamin about climate change.
So Beryl has already barreled through the region. We've had 9 reported deaths so far. But based on what you're telling me, we could anticipate even a more active hurricane season. What should we expect going forward?
Yes, we should expect an even more active hurricane season, and that is as far as the numbers of hurricanes are concerned. We talk about the numbers of hurricane, and the more amount of hurricane development or cyclonic development, and there's a greater chance or probability that it will hit land somewhere. So that the more we have development, we are more in danger, so to speak, of being affected by one of these cyclones. For the whole of the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico, NOAA has predicted 17 to 25 storms, 8 to 13 of which could become hurricane and 4 to 7 major hurricanes. What is of concern to us is our area of interest, just to the east of the Lesser Antilles and Trinidad and Tobago, because any one of those cyclones form in that area would directly threaten us at times. So we have to be very careful with everything that comes across in the equatorial waters, the tropical waters from Africa to the Caribbean area. And we are predicting for that area an above normal season also. We're looking at 6 likely named storms, the average of which would have been 4 between 1991 to 2020. We're looking at the most likely number of hurricanes to be 3, the average of which is 1. And as I said, the more cyclones that develop in that area, the more we are threatened by one which could possibly come across our lands. And we have already seen that occurring with Beryl.
Gary, what you're saying is frightening, to say the least. It underscores the reality and the gravity of climate change and its impact on small island developing states like ours, the Trinidad and Tobago, and in fact the rest of the region. What can we do to mitigate this?
Climate change is a fact. We are in the middle of climate change. It is occurring. We are seeing the evidence of it as hot days in Trinidad. We are seeing the average maximum temperatures reaching close to 34, many days reaching 35 degrees Celsius. It is a fact. We have to now, if we haven't done it before, we have to now change our behaviors. We have to go into a behavioral change and sort of reduce our own personal carbon footprints, as to do things so as not to put greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. That is the most we can do as individual people. And maybe when we all do it together, we could have some mitigating effect as to the effects of climate change as the years go by.
Well, 2024 was the year of the Paris Olympics, and despite the best efforts of our athletes in Trinidad and Tobago, we did not come away with any medals from those games. Altos spoke with the chairman of the sports company of Trinidad and Tobago, Larry Romany, in the immediate aftermath of the Olympics to get a sense of how we can fix this problem in the years to come.
I think that the nation may not be aware that funding is really not the issue.
Okay.
Every single athlete that performs or that competes for Trinidad and Tobago on a national team, regardless of wherever they're ranked, can apply for funding and get it. It's there. You go onto the Ministry of Sports website and you can apply for funding. People don't apply. Now, we have a welfare desk which we can help people apply for funding, but every single athlete in Trinidad, unlike when I was at TTOC, they took only ranked athletes and they funded only ranked athletes. Now, all athletes are able to fund. The issue is, how do we bring these national governing bodies up to scratch with something like that? How do we get them to marry those interests? And it's on two sides of the equation. You can't only be focusing on the elite side of the equation. You have to focus on the participation side of the equation. When you think that it's less than 1% of a population become gold medalists, you can't start off with a base of 300 kids, right? And you think we have over 250,000 kids in school. You know, we need to start allowing kids to play. We need to start allowing kids to have access to participation in sport and not just picking them based on how we see they look and how they can play the sport well, because skill can be trained in anybody. You can't train genetics. Genetics are natural. That's what you're born with.
Right. So then just in looking back, we've won 19 medals at the Olympic Games since 1948 coming forward. So that's roughly one per Olympic game. Have we been punching over weight, and is this a bit of a cyclical issue? Because before 2000, I think we went through a period before Atto came along. We didn't win Olympic medals for a while. Yeah. So some have been saying, well, we're small, we have a small population, and it's a bit cyclical in terms of winning Olympic medals.
Yeah. It's cyclical to an extent, but it's a lot of planning. Yeah. It takes about 10 years to really make an athlete who can compete effectively at the Olympic level. It means that you have to plan. If that is your goal as a national governing body, you then have to plan age group sport. And you have to track age group sport. And you're not going to get somebody coming out of secondary school here and going to the Olympic Games, which means that you now have to track them through their university careers. And you have to ensure that while they're there, they're getting that assistance. And they're getting the support that they need. Now, that's what happens. When they travel abroad, they tend to fall out of the cracks because the communication falls apart. We will be putting in a program where we are in touch with every single athlete that we expect will be in LA. Now, the thing is that all the athletes that competed at Paris, I would expect that almost all of them are going to be in LA. Right. Because most of them are below 22. With the exception of Jareem and young Carter. And I think that it's easy to be in touch with 17 people. Plus, once we get an idea of which athletes are in the NCAA, we can actually be in touch with all of them, because at the sport company, we have an elite athlete department where we have the capacity to be able to be of some assistance. But we need to know what assistance is really necessary. And that is a marrying of information between the NGB, sport, and the athlete, the NGB, and sport, and vice versa. But over and above all of that, we have to capture young people participating. Because when you look at it, what you see, there's a gap between the age group that is medaling and the age group. If you look at Jamaica, nobody 21, 18, 19 medaling in Jamaica. The people who are participating from podiums and getting there are over 25. People who have been seasoned in the thing. Right. And you get the odd genetic individual that is so superior. Yeah. The guy in discus, he just went out there and threw, and he and all was surprised. Right. That, he broke the Olympic record.
And we had that with Keyshawn back in London.
Exactly.
He was a 20-year-old.
That's right.
Nobody expected that.
Right. Nobody expected
But those things come around very, very rare.
And this is why I'm saying that I Choose Sport program is beautiful, because it touches every child. And we will, in sport, touch every child in Trinidad and Tobago. And we will then channel that through the governing bodies. So it's about giving the governing bodies the people that have the genetics, and it's up to them to use their development programs. Right? And that's the thing, to get governing bodies to activate development programs that is not necessarily competition-oriented, because we have this flawed thought that competition breeds success.
Definitely, and the work continues in 2025. Well, that's a look back at our big interviews for 2024, which we did here on Altos. We thank you very much for your support and encouragement during this past year. And we wish all our viewers a happy and a holy, peaceful 2025. Remember to pray for Trinidad and Tobago, read your Bible, and learn your faith. As we wrap up our final program for the year, we leave you with some sights and sounds from the opening of the creche at Archbishop's house a couple of weeks ago. Thank you very much for viewing.
Altos is brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.